Artificial intelligence is remaking marketing as we speak, and if you're a marketer, you can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Jeff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they explore the latest AI news, trends, tools, and ideas that are creating the future of marketing today. This is No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, yes, I am an AI. Take it away, Jeff and Greg.
Hey, this is Greg Verdino. Welcome to No Brainer. I'm here with my good friend, Jeff Livingston. How are you today, Jeff?
What's up? I see we're both wearing black today.
We are. We're back in black, my friend.
That's right. I always wear black t-shirts for these things. And now whenever I go out and network, I just put a sport coat over my black t-shirt. I don't have to figure out what to wear, man. It's like easy.
People recognize you. Don't even have to look at the face. They just look at the shirt and they know it's you.
I have like 10 of them. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
Do you have a brand?
I try to mix it up. I don't know if I'm brand loyal. I go through them so quickly. I tend to go cheap t-shirt, and just when they start to, turn into garbage, I use them for regs.
There you go. Wash your car.
Absolutely.
I'm an American giant, man. That's what I wear.
All right. You're a giant in so many ways, Jeff. So
a giant in my own mind.
let's hop in. Before we do, though, just wanted to remind everybody that No Brainer is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what we do, be sure to check out marketingpodcasts.net. You'll find 50 or so of our friends all doing great marketing podcasts for marketers on everything from branding to PR to influencer to just about anything you can imagine. Lots of really good stuff there. If you are watching our show on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel and smash that like button. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any place that you like to listen to your pods, be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and rate the podcast and review us as well. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, Jeff, and everybody, not just you, because presumably somebody's listening. So we do have a lot of stuff to talk about today. And I feel like we keep coming back to the topic of sort of AI threats and risks. And certainly there have been some new announcements, new letters, things like that have focused a lot of the energy around this idea of exponential threats related to artificial intelligence. It's been dominating the news cycle. So today we're going to get to it. We're going to dissect it. We're going to, kind of talk a little bit about whether marketers should really be worried about this or should be paying attention to it all, I think before we dive into the big, kind of debate discussion part, let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's been happening out there in the world of AI over the past week or two.
Right. Yeah. So the big news obviously is Adobe finally integrated, not finally, I mean, they just announced it like 2 months ago, right? But they integrated Firefly into all things Adobe. So Premiere, After Effects, Spark, Photoshop, Illustrator, and everybody's now putting out their new Twitter images with their extended backgrounds and extended photos and album covers like the Nirvana Baby. And it's a huge trend. And we have two audiences now, like creatives are saying it's the end of the world, which ties into our larger theme. And of course, people that are saying it's the greatest thing since, the iPhone launched. And I've used it a couple of times. I showed you a couple of the horrific, jobs that it did, but at the same time, it's done a nice job extending background and doing a few little less, shall we say, aggressive things. So I just wanted to, throw it at you and get your take on it after having seen some of the output. But also, I personally think like it just proves that Adobe's onto something, right? They're doing this in a way that's a lot more useful with the tools that they already have in place. The user interface is superior, far superior to anything out there, but their AI is far inferior. And as a result, it's just not as good. They would be well served buying Midjourney or somebody because they seem like they're 9 months behind. I don't know. I'll throw it at you.
I mean, I've not been as deep into it as you have. I've certainly seen all the buzz that's happening and the things people are sharing online. And of course, people are sharing the best of their best, of course, right?
Mhm.
But I obviously saw some of the things you were showing me leading up to this show. And it looks like, and you pointed this out as well, it looks like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or any of those services looked a year ago or maybe more, making the same mistakes, the missing arm and two legs in a shoe and gobbled faces and garbled faces, maybe gobbled faces too. But it's kind of disastrous in terms of the execution on some of those things, especially to me, it looked like as it related to people. And of
Right.
course, marketer, the odds that you're going to have people in your scene, whether as the main subject or in the background, pretty high, right? People use
Right.
all products, right? So, I think it's a bit of a struggle, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, look, if you're thinking like Midjourney, the big breakthrough of 5 and 5.1 was photorealistic imagery. And
Right.
what Adobe's really good at is extending existing imagery. So that gets back to their legacy, right? Because they already
Right.
had content aware tools. So this is just an extension of that in my mind,
Yeah. Yeah.
being an experienced user. But on top of that, though, they do animation and illustration, which is fine, but it's not competitive. And there's going to be a tolerance point where people are going to get sick of waiting for them. So I think that, Adobe can move, but the clock's on, man. You got to catch up with the AI.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, to your point, the fact that this is integrated into the industry standard tool set, right? You're not asking a creative director at an ad agency or somebody at a brand to go sit on a Discord and start, kind of messing around in public, right? That's just such a
Awesome.
bizarre
So
interface.
awesome.
Being able to use a tool like this inside Premiere or Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever your primary tool set is phenomenal. But they've got to really, it looks to me as well like they've got to do a lot to catch up.
Yeah. I see an acquisition in their future. Wouldn't surprise me.
Or yeah, I don't think that's out of the question.
Had to happen, right?
Not
Unicorn land. Let's get some.
not financial advice.
Yep. Let's get into it before we get into the too nitty gritty on the Adobe thing. I'm sure we'll pick it up hopefully soon, because I feel like that's the more productive conversation for marketers. But we've had a lot of doomsaying come out in the past week. We have the malicious AI drone story where Vice reported a military AI drone killed an operator in simulation. It was a horrifically written article, in my opinion, especially as things unfolded. It became clear that their source was not a reliable source. It was speaking without just say the permission of the Public Affairs Department of the United States Air Force or the Royal Air Force, whichever one that they worked for, because it wasn't clear based on the different reporting. And, the other thing was it wasn't actually an operator that got killed. And then in the article, it said like paragraph 5 or 6, that it was a simulation. And then it
Right.
comes out afterwards, after the whole Air Force tried to clean up the horrible crisis that it created. It wasn't even called a simulation. It was a logic test or something like that.
Right.
And
Whatever that means, right?
right. I mean, but everybody was making it out to be Skynet's out there killing fucking people. Pardon my French. And, not safe for work. Sorry, folks. TechCrunch did a nice summary of the article. They blew it out of the water. This is an example of why AI is not dangerous. It's not sentient. It was really clearly a machine learning kind of algorithm where it was rewarded on points for getting answers right. The correct answer was for it to blow up the enemy. And the barrier to it blowing up the enemy was the operator who was telling it not to blow it up. So it blew up the operator in the simulation or whatever it was, the logic test. So it was really bad logic. It was horrifically formed analytics. If we're trying to keep our own guys safe, that has to be rule number 1, keep your own people safe, right?
Right.
That has to be above all. You're not supposed to blow up your operator. You're not supposed to blow up their comms tower, their vehicle, I don't know, their skateboard, whatever it is. I mean, it's just like, come on, man, what are we doing with this? So,
Yeah.
let's talk about that one because that got a lot of widespread news, and then we can pick up the letter and the Washington Post story.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not really sure what a logic test or a thought experiment, I think was another term I saw used in regards to this after the news broke and the military tried to reel it back. But I also wonder to what extent, kind of where this, if there was an AI simulation going on at all. I think it's not even clear what happened here, whether anything happened here, right? But if there was an actual simulation, and
Right.
the simulation was being run, where was this particular algorithm in terms of its reinforcement learning, right? Because that's part of the process,
I mean,
frankly.
that's part of training, right? You're going to
Right.
see this happen with military AI. I mean, like, maybe
Exactly.
that's really what the issue is. It's military AI, and everybody's like,
Right.
"Oh, fuck, military
Yeah.
AI." No, 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 no. But
Right.
it's already in
It's,
play,
this is right. It's the same. It's called, obviously it's far more substantial and significant if this were happening in a real battlefield situation than if it's, let's say, ChatGPT in a content marketing department, right? But at the same time, it's almost like the same reason we are, you try to train or fine tune a generative AI tool using reinforcement learning, which for anybody is not familiar with that. And, Jeff, you kind of spoke to it a little bit in terms of earning points and so forth, that what reinforcement learning will do. And sometimes it's sort of self reinforcement, between, let's say, two GANs in a an adversarial network kind of situation. Sometimes it's human run reinforcement, but the idea is that the algorithm has been developed, the data's fed into the algorithm produces a result, right? That result may or may not be a successful result based on what you anticipated, and that's where reinforcement learning comes in, right? So you end up in a scenario where you run a query, the algorithm produces a result, you reinforce a positive result with a point, right? Or you reinforce a negative result by taking a point away. And the AI effectively learns to do the things that get it rewarded as opposed to the things that get it punished, right? So that could have been a natural part of the process where the military, if they were running a simulation, was looking to see if the algorithm was properly tuned, right? So this
right.
might be as I guess Van Jones might say, a nothing burger out of the
Oh, it's
gate,
a
right?
huge nothing burger. Yeah,
But and it
anybody
turned
that's in
out to be
data
even
science
right.
knows that.
It turned out to be even like less than a nothing burger. It's like it took the burger away from you.
Here, you know what I think it was? It exposed people, right? It exposed Vice, first of all, for being a crappy publication. No news there. I mean, but people that are reading Vice and taking it seriously and sharing it on the internet, shame on you because you identified yourself kind of as a little bit out there, right? And then, it also exposed people that are really just really afraid of this thing. Like when I put up that poll before our show just to get some thoughts on the overall topic, I mean, it was scary for a little bit there. Like initially response was like 40% AI is a mortal threat, and
Right.
this shows that it is. And I mean, fortunately I felt better about my community because that came down to 18%, but still, 1 in 5 people are afraid of this stuff. And that
Right.
just tells you that this general meme that's going around is pretty serious, right?
Right.
So,
And that points to the power of narratives, right? And to also
right,
the power of the people who share the narratives, the media and so forth, right? To sway public opinion about something, for better or for worse, right? Advocacy
right,
organizations do it all the time. That's what marketing is, right? Is swaying public opinion about, a topic. The topic may be trivial, drink my soda instead of theirs, but it's still swaying public opinion and behavior,
right.
which I guess
But
logically, kind of
yeah,
brings us into the other big
the
kind
other
of,
story, the CAIS story,
existential.
right? Yeah, the Center for AI Safety, a long-standing organization that thinks AI is going to ruin the world, put out a statement that said, which, may or may not be true. I'm not going to say it's not, but they've been around for a while, at least 10 years now. So mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks, such as pandemics and nuclear war. Signatories include Jeffrey Hinton, our friend, the former Googler who said AI is scary, but without specifics. Our good friend Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, master of PR, and his crazy uncle Bill Gates at Gates Ventures and largest stockholder of Microsoft, which also is the largest stockholder of OpenAI. So, yeah, the media took that one and ran away with that one and took a whole bunch of doomsday scenarios and, did the whole Skynet thing with it again too. Like, is this really a terminal event? And to me, I read that statement, which is a one-liner, and I'm like, duh. I mean, who's not going to say that? Yeah, no, we should let AI ruin the world. I mean, like, come on. Like, what kind of a stupid thing is that? Like, hey, you know what? We should let children jaywalk all day long. I mean, it's right there, I mean, there's nothing to be said there. And to be clear, we're nowhere near the level of having an AGI. I mean, there's just nothing that makes me think that we're close to it right now. I don't feel anything that I'm seeing from any of these tools is dangerous in that sense. I think the real question is why these brands are signing it. I think we'll get into that in the second half. And then, but here was the capper on that. That story happened. And then President Biden came out and said, some people are very worried about AI, that it can actually overtake human thinking and planning. So we've got a lot to think about. It's pretty, significant, and he implied danger. Of course, the media said he did say it was dangerous, but he said, but it's an incredible opportunity. We have to do something with it, right? So the businessman came in like, yeah, sure. Yeah, there's potential there. Yeah, I'll sign that statement, but let's make some money, right? And then he fell down and everybody just talked about how he fell down.
I fall down at least once a day. I'm just going to put that out there.
I'm not slamming it for falling down, but we all know what happens when these presidential candidates or presidents fall down. It's particularly when they're 80. I mean, the Bob Dole moment, right? Right. It's the Bob Dole moment. So that's what the media ran away with. And they forgot that he talked about AI, which is just fine as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, obviously government has a big role in this too as a regulator. I do think that sets us up pretty nicely to talk about that. I'll precede the Washington Post article, which gets into some of our implications, and then let you have the last soundbite before a break. Also the Washington Post came out with an article talking about how people like you and me, people like our listeners, people that are content marketers and writers are now walking dogs because their employers used ChatGPT, which caused our friend Ann Haley to put a post that got ludicrous amounts of sharing and comments and likes and not likes. Obviously that hits the funny bone, right? That's the sore spot, really, the real, perhaps, danger. So to you, my friend.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there are real risks. There's real dangers. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of concern. The media is fueling a lot of this in terms of the kind of the existential risk panic, the Time magazine cover, about, robots taking over, the, sort of Terminator, fantasies coming to play in real life. Right. And I think this is, something that's been in my mind, because of this, this episode as we were planning it. And, we're going to get into this conversation, that at some point this has to get real, right? And, without denying risks, both near term and long term, and we're going to talk about that some more. We've spoken about it on other episodes as well, but I was having a conversation with a former client who's become kind of a friend over the years, right? And, I won't name his name or his companies. I'm not sure if if I'm at liberty to do that. I do know he's an occasional listener and enjoys what we do. But he's been head of digital at a couple of major brands. He's still involved with the industry in a big way. And he was saying, like, look, I'm seeing all this stuff. I'm seeing all this crap about the existential risks. I'm seeing stuff about the real risks. I'm seeing all of the hubbub, But when I put on my hat as a brand marketer, none of that is helpful to me at all, right? I need to know about it. I need to understand it. I need to think about its implications because my consumers are being fed this information and they're forming opinions about artificial intelligence that may influence the way they feel about my brand if I start engaging them using artificial intelligence, right? I need to understand where my company might be at risk based on certain things we choose to do or not do. But at the end of the day, telling me that robots are going to extinguish humanity at some indeterminate point in the future doesn't give me anything to act on when my CEO is breathing down my neck and saying we need a strategy, right? And a strategy doesn't mean go blindly into it, right? It's anything but. And in fact, go slow might be the right strategy for some organizations, right? There is no hard evidence yet that says AI is going to give organizations an advantage. Logically, you believe it will, but it hasn't proven out yet, right? It's still too early, especially with something like generative AI, right? So, but like his point was, kind of the hand wringing and the arm flailing, has to kind of give way to some logical, rational discussion about, okay, that's happening, but what do we do anyway? Kind of, which sounds a little bit crass, but
Right.
that
Perfect
is the truth.
segue.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we're at what is it? Welcome to the Terror Dome. Panic at the Edge of the Disco. I don't know, getting back to some 90s and 80s rap here. But yeah, of course extinction's bad. And yeah, I think we're looking at job displacement for some people, particularly those that work for companies that maybe don't value quality, or, in places where people are doing rote tasks that's easily replaced by AI. But I think this is not anything new. I think that what we are seeing is something that's happening very fast. And as we've discussed in the past, it's also happening to people that use the very tools that we use to communicate. And so they're being very vociferous about their fear. And it's become quite a debate. I mean, if you think about journalists, they're clearly in the marks. People like you and me who are content marketers, content creators, we're clearly in the marks or in the crosshairs, if you would. So, this is a big conversation. And of course, the truth is that AI itself is neither good or bad. But it really is about, how it's used. And I think when you look at that Washington Post story, it was sensational in the very Washington Post way. So it comes off as something that's thought out sensationalism. But what it doesn't really dive into is, who are the companies that are replacing people with ChatGPT? Because I think, I know, we talked about Claude, we talked about all these different technologies privately. They get you when they're working well, 80 to 90% of the way there. When they don't work well, you're spending twice the time, which is what you had said earlier today, right?
Right.
And it's like, okay, so are we really going to replace people with this? Because that's going to tell me something about your brand if I'm getting that crap, from your content communications. And also, I do think that with the PR side of this, particularly with the CAS stuff, there's more to be said on this. And in particular, why is OpenAI backing this? Why is Microsoft backing it? They have a stake in the game and they're getting something out of it. And that includes, and you've discussed this with me, plausible deniability, but also that they've set themselves up for the hero narrative. Do you want to break that down?
Yeah, I mean, like when you think about it, right, there's only a handful of possible explanations as to why the companies who are making AI are actually, are signing on or kind of doing this whole kind of dance, right? This rigmarole, right? One, which is like the least of all possibilities, in my opinion, is that they know something we don't. And I'm sure they know plenty we don't, but, there is, I suppose, a legitimate argument that says, these people are legitimately frightened of their own creation. They believe they've made a Frankenstein's monster, right? But the challenge with that, of course, is that they are the companies that are developing and commercializing this technology. So if
Shame
they
on
should
them.
right, if they should be doing anything, it shouldn't be signing letters and then throwing their hands up, right? They should and
Yeah.
asking people, governments to regulate them up until the point that the governments do regulate them, right? That's the Sam Altman classic, right? Is week one, he's sitting in front of Congress begging to be regulated. Week two, he's threatening to pull out of the EU because they're regulating, right? So there's clearly something off there, right? That smells a little bit fishy. But clearly, if you're so concerned about your own technology, your own systems, the tools you're building, then who's better positioned to slow development, to be more responsible, right? It's them, right? So there's
Right.
that
It's
argument that
horseshit,
they're
right?
truly concerned, that they truly
Yeah.
want regulation, just does not hold water. As far as I'm,
Well,
right?
I think about the captains of industry in other parts of the world. Like, I mean, how about Dow Chemical? Can we have
Right.
that, please? Can we do that? Or Jim Farley over at Ford? Hey, that seatbelt malfunction? Yeah, we didn't have any control over that. It kind of got away from us. It was sentient. Government didn't regulate us, even though we asked, like, come on, these guys get sued for hundreds of millions and billions of dollars every time they have this kind of error. That's to me like the number one thing that these clowns are trying to pull off, is to accelerate their speed of deployment and to do so without liability. They want plausible deniability. They want to say that we've warned you. We told you not to use it, but we built it for you to use, and we integrated it into everything, including your fridge. So sorry,
right. That comes to this plausible deniability and sort of, what, frankly, a lot of the ethics community points to as a smokescreen, right? That
totally,
by putting the emphasis on a far future existential risk that nobody could argue against, to your point earlier, it would be impossible to look at that 22-word statement and say, you know what, I disagree. Extinction's totally fine, right? That's a totally reasonable statement to make. The problem is it ignores everything else that's going to happen with these same systems long before they become general intelligence, become sentient, become artificial superintelligence, right? It's all the stuff that's happening now, or the issues, the risks that have been known for years and years and years, right? Because we've seen them play out in social media. We've seen them play out in search, in programmatic ad targeting, in all of these other systems outside of marketing, right? Systems that are used to set bail or to, for sentencing criminals or whatever else might be happening, or medical systems, right? That there is inherent bias in these systems, that this bias could be harmful to some people, that they will, that the access to these tools might widen a digital divide, or all these other things that are true, right?
Or further reinforce, to your point, racism. I mean, like, this is like the real thing that they're not talking about.
Right. And, that's the argument. It's interesting because you've got the existential risk guys, and they're mostly guys. It's lots of tech bros. It's the CEOs of all these companies. And, people who have in a lot of ways, a vested financial stake in the success of artificial intelligence. And then you have the ethics folks who are, largely, frankly, academic, and interestingly enough, also skew female. Who are, can't see eye to eye on these issues, right? And it's the ethics folks who kind of keep pointing to this, like, the harm, frankly, the existential risk argument does, because it just changes the narrative in such a way that it makes it impossible to actually make practical, real-time decisions, not only about how to regulate these systems, but how organizations should be thinking about and actually using and deploying these systems.
Right. Well, and also government's got a word or a bone to pick on this one as well, because they see it coming to them. They're using it. I mean, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't think the Department of Defense is actively engaged in AI development right now, you're kidding yourself. They call them black boxes for a reason. I mean, it's been out there for a long time. In fact, there are people that I know in the area that have done systems to use, for example, machine learning to locate down the Air Force bombers, I mean, like great use of the technology, but I mean,
Yeah. But I mean, but even
you're
not
kidding
even,
yourself.
right. And, you don't have to take it to that level even, because like the city of New York is using generative AI tools to translate a document from English into 100 different languages, right? So these tools are
Great
in play,
use.
right? It's a
Yeah.
perfect use case. So these tools are already in play, right? And, you
Yeah.
know, there's this
It,
sort of this
it's
interesting
silly.
dynamic that has
Yeah.
kind of, I think, come into play in that, nobody went to, I can't imagine, you know, the federal government, let's just stick to the federal government, going to the head of like the CEO of JP Morgan and saying, "Hey, we need your help to regulate money laundering or mortgage fraud or and saying, here, you regulate yourself." Or I mean, we see time and time again, right? With like you repeal like a Clean Water Act or you weaken it or whatever, and you've got
Right. Then you have a
CEOs
problem.
of companies, you have CEOs of companies saying, let's just dump it's going to save us a few pennies on the dollar. Let's dump the pollution right into the river in our own community to poison the water we're going to drink. Right. And it's like,
Right.
but in the case and government, you know, regulators, Congress, right. They're not experts in pharmaceuticals or finance or housing or whatever. Right. Um, but they still regulate those things. And you can argue whether they regulate it well or they regulate it poorly, but to an extent, we expect and we trust them to regulate these things. When it comes to technology, they keep turning to the kind of the wolf in the henhouse, the fox in the henhouse, whatever it is,
Right.
going to these CEOs and saying, "Hey, why don't you guys get together and tell us what to do?" Which is
Well,
me really
there's
bizarre.
another part of this game too, which is that these same companies are selling billion-dollar contracts to the US
So
government.
there is that as
So,
well.
I mean, like, so they're also playing this game like, oh, yeah, we want to work well with government. Well, of course they do. I mean, like, you look at the three main cloud providers for the government and the secure FedRAMP cloud environment. Shows you what it's like to live in DC as a marketer. Sorry. But you got Google, Amazon, and Microsoft Azure, right? Oh my God, shocking. It's the big three again. So of course these guys are all doing this. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah. So and I think, when you look at all of this, and you've said this before, we've had this conversation before, that, you know, these calls for regulation by the CEOs of the companies who could self-regulate in a sense by slowing their development and their deployment, by putting more guardrails in place on the systems that they're making available to people, often for free at this massive scale, a la ChatGPT,
Right.
or Midjourney or whatever. Um, is that, it gets everybody talking. And even if it's negative, right? Bad news sells, right? So it gets everybody talking about these tools and technologies. It gets everybody concerned about what happens to me if I fall behind, right? That's
Right.
the Washington Post story, the writers, saying, well, now I'm a dog walker. And the media eat it up because it gets them ratings and clicks and whatever, right? You create this,
And the reporters are also equally afraid. So they're
right,
more than willing to pile on.
right. And you end up with this sort of, what for a consumer brand might be a virtuous cycle of brilliant marketing, but in this instance is a vicious cycle of brilliant marketing also, that, kind of keeps these technologies in the news and keeps people kind of in this constant state of FOMO and FUD and, I've got
Yeah.
to adopt this and I've got to figure out how to do X or Y or Z, or I'm going to be made obsolete by a technology I don't truly understand. And that
And and to some extent,
technology, right?
yeah, I do think that's accurate because if you buy into the fear too much, right, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, right, where you are going to be replaced,
Yeah.
and especially if you don't know it. I mean, to me though, you got to look at it more like, okay, my software has received a major upgrade. So I need to learn that software. And I think that's where the conversation, the productive conversation is
Yeah.
for professionals in every field that's affected by this.
Right.
But for this kind of histrionics that are occurring, and they're going to continue to occur, this panic, it's really clear to me it's going to be like 50, maybe 20% to 1/3 of the market. It's going to constantly be engaged in kind of heel digging and kind of fear and combativeness with this. I mean, they're going to have a really hard time with this. And it's clear that it's going to be a very public hard time as well. And there's going to be a lot of stories about people being displaced because people are vested in fighting for what they've got. And it's unfortunate. Change is hard. We've seen this with major technologies before. I mean, same thing with the Gutenberg press, right? In the Bible, people are like, oh my God.
Not only, and these days, not only is change hard, but change is exhausting, right? Because we've been going
so fast,
cycle after cycle of sort of, accelerating change for how long now, right? I mean,
but when does this become a distraction? When does this story become a distraction where people like you and me are like, okay, go panic at the disco. See you later.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, and that kind of brings us to kind of like, how do we turn this around, right? Is it really all a big distraction? Should any of it matter to a marketer? If I'm sitting on top of a brand organization, or, I'm a CMO, or I'm a digital director at an agency or whatever, how do I turn this around? How do I make it productive? How do I take it from sort of, it's like, get beyond, like we've spoken about in other episodes, get past the hype, right? The high of the high hype is as bad as the low of the low hype, right? It's just hype.
Totally.
Right? Out at the edges, and it's screaming from the tower, or it's, hiding in the cellar. And neither of those things actually gets us to the heart of why this stuff actually matters to a market. So what are your thoughts there?
So one is, now there's a clear public relations issue now for any brand that's involved with AI or publicly involved with AI, where you instantly have a 20% alienation factor, right? Where you have folks that are suspicious of your actions. And there's some of it where I think you can launch things without having to disclose it, like basic scripting on your site where you're sourcing images and that kind of one-to-one marketing kind of thing. But the other thing is, when there are real applications that people are using, then they need to know that they're using it. There's the ethics part of it. It's the governance, if you would. And governance now no longer includes just data, right? And cleaning up the data, but it's also the public use of safety. It's the ethics disclaimer, the commitment to correct wrongs when they happen. Because I think that brands have to be smart about that and get in front of it. We will correct wrongs as they are happen. We appreciate you as a member of our user community. And when you see something, let us know. I mean, that's not a commitment to change it, because I think you and I both know that there are enough people out there that will complain about just about anything. But, it's like Amazon says, when you hit like a certain threshold on your Amazon store where you have maybe, I think it's either 2 or 5% negative reviews, you have a real problem that you have to address. And so these brands have to be on it, and they have to be looking at these issues before they get out of hand, and they have to have a commitment to address it. So I think number one, right out of the gate, it's governance, right? You have to own it, and you have to be very clear on what the risks are and be in front of them.
Yeah. And I think that with so many other sort of systems, whether it's software or, just kind of any kind of part of an ecosystem, I think in a lot of cases, you figure sort of like wherever the problem originates, the developer, so to speak, is accountable, right? They've got, there's a service level agreement, right? And the developer is responsible. Whereas here, it's just as likely the person, or the organization rather, that deploys it is responsible, right? Because you're deploying it in some ways knowing it's an imperfect tool or an imperfect system. And it's not going to be, I don't believe it will be acceptable to be like, well, I didn't know that they used, content that was, that trounced on somebody else's IP.
Right.
Right? When that shows up in a Coca-Cola ad, a Pepsi ad, a MasterCard ad, an American Express ad, whatever, all right, that's going to become a problem for that brand, right?
Right.
Um, so I think kind of, as a brand owner, you have to have this philosophy of absent anybody else, I am accountable for the ways in which
Yes,
I choose to utilize and deploy these technologies in my marketing programs. Um,
totally.
which
Or
feels
any
a
other
little
program,
bit right,
customer
or any other
service,
program. Sure, of course.
user manuals.
Right.
Yeah. If your user
Which
manual's bunk because you use generative AI, shame on you.
right, which feels a little bit different from, let's say, the use of AI in programmatic advertising, right? Where your ad may end up on an objectionable website. And as the advertiser, you might get some blowback from your consumers, but you can always go back to the programmatic ad network and say, you guys
Block
didn't
the site.
know, right?
Yeah.
In this instance, it's like, sorry, your content marketer used it and didn't fact check their work. It's not our problem as the creator, the technology company, to make sure you're a responsible user.
So that's number two, right? And this is the classic AI thing. So this isn't new, right? It's new for marketers, but it's not new. And you say this to me all the time whenever we talk about these tools. Human. You have to have a human review the content. It's the human in the loop. If
Yeah.
there, and this is Adobe's premise on the whole ethical side of it. AI assists humans, but if you remove the human completely from the loop, so to speak, then you're
Yes.
setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for a crisis. And that's when I saw that Washington Post story. I'm like, well, yeah, these guys are setting themselves up for a huge fail. So it sucks. It sucks for the dog walkers.
Yeah.
But
And that
those companies also kind of suck, and they're going to end up eating some crow at some point. I'll
right.
guarantee it.
And that's the interesting thing here, right? Is that, and there's a thread of this thread has run through a number of our conversations. It's run through even a lot of the stories and things we've been discussing today, going back to the military example from, early in the episode, right? Where we have this tendency to anthropomorphize this technology in particular, right? We anthropomorphize lots of technologies, but this one in particular, because it seems human-like. And it's very easy to say AI is going to take a job, or AI made a decision to take out its human operator. And it's not AI making a decision or taking a job, right? So when you look at it within the context of business, what it comes down to is, will profit-driven executives in for-profit organizations leverage AI in a way that does, both temporary and lasting damage to their workforce, right? And, and what does that look like? In an extreme case, it looks like, of course, you're getting rid of a whole bunch of people. There's a layoff. People are out of work. They're walking dogs. They're, kind of on the dole, so to speak. But even before that, it's making decisions about how you design your workflows and integrate technology into those workflows that essentially remove the human autonomy or agency that the people in your workforce have, right? So it's important as you're thinking about the ways in which AI, generative AI in particular, for marketing, I think, is integrated into the workflows, that ultimately at the end of the day, the human worker remains in control over the tool, not the other way around. Let the tool provide the efficiency, the productivity, improve workflows, bring all of what it can bring to the table, but ensure that the humans in that process are the ones who are making the final call, right? And I see this even in like content, in in the work I'm doing. It might make writing faster, but it actually makes editing twice as important.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, that's a different skill set, by the way, than writing, in my opinion.
Of course.
So when I've seen people that are not great writers who are fantastic copy editors that I'm a horrible editor, for example. I think, I really think that without good editing, I'd be a dead man. And I just think that even when you look at things like Grammarly, for example, which are supposedly editing tools, they are formulaic. And
Sure.
you do need an actual copy editor to kind of look at some of the stuff that they go through. So back to you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So there is that idea, and this goes to, I think, whether it's earning the trust of your consumers by using these tools responsibly and transparently as they should be used, right? Or earning the trust of the people inside your organization by using them in a way that supports human autonomy and decision making and agency and allows work to become better and not worse, right? That's to me always at the center of like an AI strategy, is this idea of how do we build trust into the system from the get-go? Because without that,
Right.
your workers won't use it, your consumers won't accept it, and you end up in a lose-lose situation as a brand.
Well, there's also, and I think this may be the third component, which I haven't seen emerge yet, but I do foresee this happening pretty quickly, which is the CSR component of it, or the corporate social responsibility aspect of it. And, you and I have lived through a few recessions, and part of the difference between companies that just can people and companies that have to make changes and help people on their journey is that they help them find their next place. And GE was notorious for doing this, helping people find their next opportunity, giving them outplacement services, giving them training, that kind of thing. And I think that the real good companies here are not going to just like put people on the chopping block. They're going to invest in retraining. They're going to invest in the next opportunity for these people. They're going to show them how to adopt the tools so that they can continue to be productive members of the workforce.
Yeah.
They're going to set up foundations to engage in these tools. They're going to go to the university level. They're going to teach kids how to adapt technology. They're going to fund the general assemblies of the world. Yeah, this is something that we're not seeing a lot of discussion about. I think that's probably the most productive way that people can embrace this technology moving forward, is not just saying like, hey, this is going to put people out of work, but like, hey, we need to adapt a new skill set for the future. We need to retrain our workforce, and we're going to be leading that effort as a company that's leading. I mean, I'd love to see Sam Altman and his little hoity-toity, we're the company of AI, get in front of this, but I don't see those clowns doing that. They just want to get as much PR as they can, both as saviors and as, false prophets,
Yeah, I think, I agree with you that, whether this is the right place for it to land or not, the organizations that are deploying these systems inside their, their work streams, are going to need to get serious about upskilling and reskilling. And when I think about, my life at an agency, and it's been a long time since I've been in like a big agency, like a Saatchi or a Digitas or whatever. But, in those organizations, I feel like upskilling and reskilling amounted to like a once a week brown bag lunch where you sat and listened to some media sales rep pitch something that they're trying to sell you. Right. There wasn't any real concerted effort to do the kind of serious reskilling you're talking about. And, when I look at, we talked briefly about, we didn't cover it today, but the announcement between NVIDIA and WPP and this sort of wide scale deployment of AI systems across all of WPP. And immediately when I see something like that, I think about fantastic. You're spending who knows how many millions on a technology tool set, but what are you actually doing to reskill your employees? Because even small technical implementations fail because the employees don't embrace the tools, don't know how to use them, are concerned what's going to happen to them, and they dig their heels in against the change. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen there. For all I know, WPP has an amazing reskilling program in place. But for any brand or agency, large or small, I know you're making a face. I'm just saying hypothetically.
Yeah,
but,
it's a big one.
For any brand, large or small, any agency, large or small, any freelance, I guess, so, like, somebody's going to take the accountability for putting the right change management in place. And without
unless
it,
you're a DIYer who just runs out and does these things, you're an early adopter. I think you and I would probably fall into that camp, or we pretend to be. We're trying to stay in front of these things. I constantly am using every personal project as an opportunity to play with the tools myself.
Right.
And, it's just, look, I don't think that they're victims here with a lot of this. I mean, in some cases there are where people are just losing their jobs without having a say in it. But at this point, if you're in this game and you're not adapting and you're not looking to upskill, and you're not trying to upskill your team, if you're in a management position or a CMO, then you're setting people up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I see it. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Well, should we get into the brainer and no brainer? That's kind of a morbid end. You're screwed. Get the skills or you're out.
Let's end this on a real down note. What's the brain? What's the brainer this week, my friend?
So when you hear one of these stories about like AI conquering the world and, killing all the lettuce in all the fields across the world, these kinds of malignant AI stories, you got to really ask yourself, why is this story being written this way? What is the actual cause of the story? What created the situation? Is the story being reported accurately? I remember when blogs first started to really hit, remember we had to triangulate the news a little bit. You'd have to find 3 different sources before you accepted it as fact. I think it's time to kind of get back to that basic quality principle where, hey, have I read all the perspectives on this, or is this headline really accurate? So, what's in it for the people that are writing it? What's in it for the people that are pushing the story to the media outlet? Why are these people saying this? Ask.
Great. And I guess
no brainer
on that, for a no brainer, it's, if you're a marketing decision maker, agency side or brand side, doesn't make a difference. You can't kind of point the finger at the AI companies and expect them to take the blame, right? That, we've been speaking about this obviously, over the course of the past 15 or so minutes, I think pretty hard. Is that ultimately,
I'm sorry.
Is that, ultimately, you are responsible for how your company deploys AI. And that means that, if there are outcomes that are unexpected, whether that's AI that leads you to make bad decisions in terms of how you market, or AI that is deployed in your organization in a way that is not workforce positive, that it is on your shoulders to, to kind of take responsibility. So you have to have the right policies, the right governance, be ready for crisis the same way you would be for any kind of PR crisis, or a social media crisis.
God help you.
Right. It's like a lot
Nobody likes those. You've been through a couple of those, right? Oh my God. Oh my God.
But you need to be realistic about it. But there is a silver lining there, which is that if you do the right things, right? If you bake trust into the system from the ground up, if you are deploying AI against a legitimate and appropriate use case, particularly a use case that is less about saving money as an organization and more about driving growth and building better relationships with your customers, and you have the right governance in place and you respect human authority and agency and all of that stuff, you can actually bring your brand to a place where you are a better, smarter marketer that builds better, stronger relationships with the people that you serve out in the marketplace. And I think that's the silver lining here. It's being aware of these things, but using them as sort of a set of data points, or understanding the background noise maybe is a way to think about it, but still rising above that noise by using these kind of understand the risks and the responsibilities in a way that allows you to avert the risk, take responsibility, and actually build something that benefits your company and your customer.
Right. You are responsible, and not adapting is also a responsibility. So if you don't adapt, then you're going to be held accountable for that as well. And your competition definitely will. So I think that's kind of part of the game here.
Yeah.
So I think that's a wrap. Would you agree?
I agree.
All right. Let's keep the good times rolling then. Thank you for listening to us through the Marketing Podcast Network or however you get your podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube, hit the like button, And please show us your support if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, Apple, whatever the platform is. Maybe it's VR today because that announcement came out.
Big day.
We're recording during the announcement. I mean, God, this is how much we love you all. We don't even watch Apple best marketing on earth to record this. But, whatever, if you're listening to Apple, please rate us and like us there as well. We really appreciate the reviews. So if you could do that, it goes a long way towards getting this podcast out there and helping other listeners discover us. And last but not least, check out nobrainerpodcast.com, where you can also drop us an email. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn. We do take suggestions and comments, and we welcome them. So thank you and peace out.